I moved into the apartment on a quiet afternoon. The building was old, with narrow staircases and walls that smelled faintly of dust and paint. My friends helped me carry the last box inside, but once they left, silence filled the rooms. The place was larger than I expected. High ceilings, wooden floors, windows that creaked when I opened them. The landlord said no one had lived here for years. That fact should have bothered me, but I liked the thought of space that had been left untouched. That first night, I sat on the floor with my laptop. I had not unpacked yet, so the rooms looked hollow. The light bulbs flickered when I turned them on, but I convinced myself it was only faulty wiring. Around midnight, I saw the first shape. I was walking to the kitchen when I noticed something in the corner near the front door. A dark outline, still, like a figure pressed against the wall. My breath caught in my throat. I blinked, and it was gone. I told myself it was the shadow of the coat rack. The following night, I saw another. This time by my bedroom door. A tall silhouette, motionless. I forced myself to reach for the switch, flooding the room with light. Again, nothing there. I could not sleep. The old floors creaked as if someone moved through the apartment. I pressed my pillow against my ears, telling myself the wood shifted with the night air. By the third night, I stopped denying it. The shadows were always in different places. Sometimes by the kitchen, sometimes at the end of the hallway. They never moved when I looked at them, but I felt their attention, heavy, patient. I bought a small surveillance camera and set it on a shelf in the living room. I wanted proof. I wanted to see if it was real or if my mind was unraveling from exhaustion. The first recording looked normal, empty rooms, still and quiet. I almost felt silly for worrying. But on the second night, the footage changed. I sat at my desk, watching the playback. At first, only static. Then the picture cleared, and I saw myself walking across the room. But behind me, near the door, a shape appeared. Black, tall, featureless. It did not match my movements. It just stood there while I crossed the frame. I rewound the footage again and again. The shape appeared even when I was not home. The camera recorded the living room empty, then a shadow sliding into view. It bent slightly, as if leaning toward the lens, then vanished. The next night, something worse happened. I entered the living room to grab my phone. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a figure lift its arm at the same time I did. I froze. I raised my hand again. The shadow raised its own, perfectly matched. I lowered mine. It lowered too. It was copying me. The fear sat so deep in my chest that I could not move. I stared into the corner where the outline trembled slightly, as if alive. Then it faded into the wall. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt a presence beside the bed. The camera recorded me tossing and turning, while in the background, shapes shifted like stains moving across the walls. The apartment no longer felt like mine. I avoided mirrors, because sometimes when I walked past, I thought I saw more than one reflection. Still, I told myself I needed answers. The building had a basement where tenants sometimes left old furniture. I went down one afternoon, the concrete damp and the air heavy with dust. In the corner, stacked among broken chairs and boxes, I'd found a pile of newspapers. Most were brittle, faded, but one was spread neatly on top, as if someone had placed it there recently. The date was decades old. I turned the page, scanning through articles about neighborhood events, nothing unusual. Then I saw it. My own face stared back at me from a grainy black and white photo. I dropped the paper onto the floor. My hands shook as I bent to pick it up again. Beneath the photo, in smudged ink, someone had written a short phrase. "We are waiting for you." I sat on the basement floor, clutching the newspaper. My photo stared up at me, printed decades before I was even born. The inked phrase beneath it burned into my mind. I forced myself to bring the paper upstairs. I wanted to study it in the light, to find an explanation. Maybe it was a trick. Maybe someone planted it there to scare me. But the paper felt fragile, its edges crumbling with age. The smell of mildew clung to it, too real to fake. That night, the shadows did not stay in the corners. I had left the camera running. When I checked the feed, I froze. The screen showed my bedroom. I was lying on the bed, my chest rising and falling. Around me, shapes gathered, 4, maybe 5, forming a circle near the mattress. They leaned closer, their heads tilting at odd angles, as if listening to my breathing. Then one of them did something different. It raised its arm, and on the screen I saw myself raise mine in perfect sync, even though I remembered being asleep. I slammed the laptop shut, my pulse pounding in my ears. The air in the room felt heavier, colder. I did not want to look at the walls. I felt them waiting there, just out of sight. The days blurred together. I barely ate. I barely left the apartment. Every time I reached for the door, I felt the shapes moving closer, like they knew I wanted to leave. I kept the curtains closed. I kept the lights on, though the bulbs flickered more violently, as if the electricity struggled against something unseen. One evening, I woke from a restless nap on the couch. The TV was on, though I had not turned it on. Static filled the screen. I reached for the remote, but the picture shifted before I touched it. The image was of me, sitting on the couch, looking directly at the camera. Except I was not moving. The version of me on the screen tilted its head slowly to the side, as though studying me. Behind it, shadows pulsed and stretched, filling the room until the screen went black again. I could not breathe. My chest tightened, as if the apartment itself pressed against me. I ran into the bedroom, desperate to find proof, something that could make sense of this. I opened every drawer, pulled books from shelves, tore open boxes I had not yet unpacked. And then I saw it. In the bottom drawer of the wardrobe, beneath an old layer of wallpaper scraps, lay another newspaper. The same photograph of me, but this time the inked words were larger, bolder, smeared across the page like they had been written in a hurry. "We are waiting for you." The light bulb above me flickered once, then went out. In the darkness, I felt them surround me, the outlines pressed close, their movements echoing mine. When I raised my hand to shield my face, countless dark hands rose in unison. When I stepped back, they shifted with me, closing the space. For the first time, one of them moved before I did. It leaned forward, closer than ever, its head nearly brushing mine. Though it had no features, I felt it smiling. The air grew heavy, pressing against my lungs. I stumbled, clutching the paper against my chest. The ink smeared under my fingers, staining my skin. And then the whisper came, faint but clear, a voice that sounded like mine. "We are already here." I never wanted to go into those woods. It was Lucas's idea, as usual. He said a weekend away from the city would clear our heads, and the rest of them agreed too quickly. By Friday evening, I found myself walking behind him, my backpack heavier than it should have been, while the path swallowed the light of the setting sun. There were 5 of us. Lucas led, always a step ahead, grinning like he knew something the rest of us didn't. Sophia walked close to him, whispering in his ear, her flashlight bouncing along the dirt. Behind them, Martin and Claire argued about which way the trail bent, though neither of them carried a map. That left me trailing, trying not to think about how quickly the forest thickened the deeper we went. By the time we reached a clearing, night had almost settled. We built a fire, ate what we carried, and for a while it felt almost normal. Sparks floated into the black sky. Sophia laughed louder than the wind. Martin made bad jokes. Even I managed to smile. But the forest had a silence beneath the laughter. Between the gaps of sound, I noticed it, too still, as if the trees held their breath. I turned once, certain I saw movement between the trunks, but nothing was there. We decided to sleep in tents, though none of us felt tired. I lay awake, the thin nylon barely a barrier between me and the woods. That was when I first heard it, a whisper. Not words I could understand, but stretched syllables, low and broken. I thought it came from my own head until I saw the fabric shift, as if something brushed past outside. I unzipped the flap. The campfire had died down to embers. Across the clearing, Lucas sat upright, staring into the dark. "What are you doing?" I whispered. He didn't answer. He lifted his hand instead, pointing toward the tree line. That was when I saw them. Shadows, not our own, not tied to any body. They moved between the trunks, slow but deliberate. Each time I blinked, they seemed closer. I felt Sophia stir behind me. She crawled out, her face pale in the moonlight. "Do you hear it too?" The whisper returned, this time clearer, threading around us. Not loud, not sharp. A quiet call. Martin stumbled out of his tent, cursing under his breath. "What the hell is that?" Before anyone could answer, one of the shadows stopped. It leaned out from behind a tree, its outline longer than the trunk itself. Lucas stood. Against all reason, he stepped closer. "Don't look at it," Claire hissed. She had tears in her eyes already. "Don't stop." But Lucas had already frozen, eyes locked on the shape. The shadow shifted. It didn't advance, not yet. But it stretched, tall and thin, its edges flickering like smoke. I couldn't move, my muscles locked, even though every thought in my head screamed to look away. When I forced my eyes down, the sound grew sharper, curling into me. A whisper right at my ear. Lucas gasped. He fell back, scrambling, but the shadow lingered near him, closer than before. "They follow if you look," Claire said. Her voice cracked. "Don't stop. Don't give them your face." Sophia grabbed my arm. "We need to go." But the woods had no path anymore. The fire was our only point of light, and even that seemed to fade. The whisper came again, circling us, and I knew if I turned fully toward it, I would not be able to turn back. We tried to move, but every direction looked the same. The trees closed in, tall and endless, the ground soft with dead leaves that swallowed our steps. The fire shrank behind us until it was only a dim glow. Lucas limped, still shaken from falling, but none of us dared stop for him. The whisper pressed harder, rising and falling as if it came from the roots themselves. Martin cursed again. "We're running in circles. I swear we passed this tree." "No," Claire said sharply. "Don't look at the trees. Keep your eyes down." I wanted to believe her, but my gaze betrayed me. At the edge of my vision, a shadow slipped between two trunks, so close its outline almost touched mine. My chest tightened. The moment I turned toward it, the whisper sharpened to a hiss, and I felt the air grow heavy. "Keep walking," Sophia muttered, pulling at my sleeve. Her hand trembled, but she didn't let go. We moved faster, pushing past branches that scratched our arms. The night thickened, the moon gone behind clouds. Our breaths broke the silence, ragged and desperate. Then Lucas stopped. He dropped to his knees, staring at something just ahead. I followed his line of sight before I could stop myself. At first it looked like nothing more than bark, but then I saw it. Burned deep into the trunk was a figure, the outline of a body, arms hanging, head tilted. The size matched his own. Sophia screamed. The whisper swelled, a chorus now, as if the forest itself spoke. More shadows emerged, dozens, maybe more, sliding between the trees. Each trunk we passed held another burned figure. Claire, Martin, me, all of us. Our shapes were etched into the wood, blackened silhouettes waiting in silence. Panic tore through the group. Martin ran first, crashing through the undergrowth, his flashlight swinging wildly. Claire followed, crying out his name. Lucas stumbled behind, his breath broken. I couldn't think. I just ran. The forest blurred into endless dark, but the shadows never slowed. Each time I dared glance back, they were there, slipping closer, their edges melting into the trees. Finally, the ground tilted, and we burst into another clearing. The air felt colder, the silence deeper. We stopped only because there was nowhere else to go. Around us, every tree bore the same scars. Silhouettes burned black. Ours. Each one carved with terrifying detail, down to the tilt of Sophia's head, the line of Martin's arms, the slight hunch of my shoulders. The whisper stopped. The forest waited. No one spoke. No one moved. Because in that stillness, I realized something. The last figures were not finished. The edges glowed faintly, as if the fire still worked. And in the bark of the tree nearest to me, the outline lifted its head. It looked back. I never enjoyed silence. Some people find comfort in it, but for me, silence always felt like pressure on my chest. When my wife, Julia, took our son on vacation to her parents', the house turned into a hollow shell. I told her I would use the time to finish work projects. In truth, I just did not want to travel. The first night was ordinary. I cooked a simple meal, watched the television until late, then went upstairs. The house seemed too big without footsteps and voices. The quiet followed me like a smell I could not get rid of. It began the next morning. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, toothbrush in hand, when I noticed something strange. The reflection lagged. My arm moved naturally, but the image inside the glass hesitated for a fraction of a second before copying me. I froze, thinking I was still half asleep. I tried again, lifting my hand slowly. The figure in the mirror followed, but just a beat late, as if waiting for me to finish first. I leaned closer. My face stared back, pale under the bathroom light. Same eyes, same tired lines, but it blinked slower than I did. I felt the air leave my lungs in one hard push. The rest of the day I'd tried to forget it. I convinced myself it was fatigue. I had been working long hours. Mirrors play tricks when you stare too long. That was the explanation I repeated in my head. At night, when I entered the kitchen for water, I saw the figure again. The refrigerator door had a metallic surface that reflected my shape. The shadow inside did not match my rhythm. I set the glass down hard, the sound echoing across the room. The following morning, I avoided looking at any mirror. I shaved by touch. I brushed my teeth staring at the sink. But the reflections waited for me anyway. The darkened glass of the microwave caught me off guard. The image inside lagged again, only this time it was darker, as if my skin tone had been pulled toward shadow. By the third day, my nerves were raw. Every time I passed a window or a polished surface, I caught it. The lag. Sometimes it was a full second behind me. Once, when I tilted my head, the figure did not move at all. It just stared at me. I started covering things. Blankets over the mirrors, towels across the TV screen, doors closed to rooms with glass. Still, it found me. The surface of my phone screen, the edge of a kettle, even the black reflection in my coffee. I called Julia that evening. She sounded happy, laughing about how our son was chasing his cousins around the yard. I almost told her about what was happening, but I stopped. I did not want her to think I was breaking down. I told her everything was fine. After the call, I sat in the living room with the lights off. I thought if I kept the house dark enough, the reflections would lose their strength. My eyes adjusted, and I began to see outlines of furniture. Then, across the room, the window caught a faint glow from the streetlight outside. In it, I saw the figure standing perfectly still, even though I was sitting. My throat went dry. I lifted my arm slowly, a test. In the window, the figure lifted its arm 2 seconds later, stiff, mechanical. I stood up, and it delayed again. Then, as if tired of the game, it smiled. The smile was not mine. I stumbled back into the hall, pulling the curtains shut so fast they nearly ripped. My hands were shaking. I kept every light on for the rest of the night, walking from room to room, refusing to stop moving. By dawn, I thought exhaustion might explain it. Lack of sleep can distort perception, but deep down, I knew it was not in my head. The thing in the glass was no trick of the eyes. It was waiting. I barely slept that night. When I did close my eyes, I dreamed of rooms filled with mirrors, each one holding a darker version of myself, each one lagging like broken video. When I woke, sweat ran down my neck, and the ceiling felt closer than it should. I decided to leave the house. If it was something inside, maybe distance would help. I grabbed my keys, went to the front door, and froze. The glassed panel in the door reflected me, only it wasn't me. The figure in the glass was closer, face pressed against the surface, smiling that same slow smile. I dropped the keys. My breath rattled in my throat. I'd backed away until I hit the staircase. I knew I was trapped. The house was filled with reflective surfaces I could not control. I went upstairs and locked myself in the bedroom. I covered the mirror with a sheet, shoved the television into the closet, turned my phone face down. I sat in the middle of the room, knees pulled to my chest, listening. The air felt too heavy, as if it carried weight. When I finally dared to lift my head, I saw the doorknob shaking slightly. I told myself it was just the house, settling, the pipes, the wind. Then I noticed the wardrobe door was slightly open, and in the black surface of its glass handle, I saw him. My copy. He didn't move when I moved. He didn't blink when I blinked. He simply stared, and then he lifted one finger and tapped on the glass, slow and deliberate. I heard nothing, but I felt the vibration crawl through my chest. I covered the handle with tape and sat back down. I don't know how much time passed. My thoughts looped in circles. Was I losing control? Was this some breakdown brought by isolation? I tried to rationalize, but my body didn't believe it. My pulse was racing, my hands trembled. When darkness fell again, I turned every light in the bedroom on. It didn't matter. The reflections found me anyway. The polished frame of a picture on the wall, the black screen of my laptop, even the glass of water beside my bed. Each surface revealed the same figure. At first, it mirrored my posture with delay. But slowly, it began to act differently. I scratched my arm. It didn't. I leaned forward. It leaned back. And then, it smiled again. That smile carved into me deeper than any sound could. I ripped the sheets off the bed, tore the picture frames down, smashed the glass of the water onto the floor. I was desperate to remove every surface, every chance of reflection. But the house had too many. The walls themselves seemed to shine faintly, as if even the paint could betray me. Around midnight, I heard footsteps. Not echoes of my own, but deliberate, steady steps circling the house. I knew Julia and my son were hundreds of miles away. The sound came from inside, not outside. My stomach turned cold. I pressed my ear against the wall. Nothing. Then I glanced at the wardrobe handle again. The reflection was closer now. My copy's face filled the surface. His lips moved, but no sound came out. I stared, frozen, until I realized what he was mouthing. One word over and over. Open. I didn't. I stayed in that room until the first gray light of dawn leaked through the curtains. I thought I had survived the night. The figures seemed weaker in daylight, less present. I almost believed the worst had passed. That evening, Julia came home with our son. I wasn't there. She called my name as she carried bags through the hallway. She noticed the sheets nailed over mirrors, the broken glass on the bedroom floor, the curtains pulled tight. Then she saw it. On the living room wall, stretched thin by the morning sun, was a shadow. It had my shape, my height, my posture, but it didn't match the light. It stood at an angle that made no sense. And when Julia stared at it, the shadow smiled at her. I never came back.